Imagine this. You're trapped in an ancient civilization. The air is thick with the scent of burning incense. The crowd roars as a priest steps forward, holding a razor-sharp obsidian blade. In the next few moments, something so horrifying will happen that even the bravest warriors would tremble. Sounds like a scene from a horror movie? What if I told you this was real? Stay till the very end, because the number one ritual on this list was so disturbing. It was banned worldwide. Let's begin number 10. The Blood Eagle. The Viking nightmare. The Vikings were feared across the world, not just because they were ruthless warriors, but because their punishments were the stuff of nightmares. And the worst of all, the Blood Eagle. Picture this: a captured enemy, stripped and tied down, their arms and legs stretched like a starfish. The executioner steps forward, and with one powerful strike, he carves into the victim's back. One by one, he breaks the ribs from the spine, pulling them outward like wings. The lungs? Pulled out and placed over the shoulders, giving the illusion of a pair of bloody, flapping wings. And here's the most terrifying part. The victim was alive the entire time. Historians once thought this was just a legend, but recent evidence suggests it actually happened. And if you think this is horrifying, just wait until you hear what the Japanese monks did to themselves in New Week 9, self-made mummies, the Sokushinbutsu ritual. Would you willingly mummify yourself alive? That's exactly what some Buddhist monks in ancient Japan did in a ritual known as Sokushinbutsu. Here's how it worked. For Fipi, 1,000 days. The monk ate nothing but tree bark, nuts, and roots, slowly starving himself to eliminate body fat. For the next 1,000 days, he drank a poisonous tea to kill all bacteria, so his body wouldn't rot after death. Finally, he locked himself inside a stone tomb, alive. A small air tube allowed him to breathe while he meditated. And then, the final step. The monk rang a tiny bell every day to signal that he was still alive. One day the bell stopped ringing. The tomb was sealed shut. Years later, when the tomb was reopened, his body was perfectly preserved, like a human statue, frozen in time. But here's the most disturbing part. Even today, some of these monks' bodies are still on display in Japanese temples. And if you thought that was eerie, number 8 will make your stomach turn. Number 8. Drinking from human skulls, the warlord's blood ritual. Imagine holding a cup in your hands, but it's not made of glass or gold. It's a human skull. That's exactly what ancient Scythian warriors, Tibetan monks, and even European kings did in a practice known as kapalika. After defeating an enemy, the warriors would behead them, clean out the skull, and carve it into a drinking cup. But here's where things get truly disturbing. These cups weren't just for decoration. They were used for drinking blood from their fallen enemies. Even some kings in medieval Europe believed drinking from a skull would give them the strength of their enemies. One of the most infamous examples, the Mongols. They would force their prisoners to drink blood from these skull cups before executing them. And just when you think it couldn't get any worse, number 7 will make your nightmares feel real. Number 7. The Egyptian Curse of the Dead, the Opening of the Mouth Ceremony. You've heard of ancient Egyptian mummies, but what if I told you they weren't always dead when the ritual started? The opening of the mouth ceremony was performed to ensure the dead could breathe, eat, and speak in the afterlife. But here's where it gets terrifying. If a pharaoh or noble died suddenly, the priest needed a living substitute to complete the ceremony. And do you know what they did? They selected a servant or slave and buried them alive. alongside the dead king. Some tombs have been found with multiple bodies inside, perfectly positioned, as if they were trying to escape. And if you thought being buried alive was horrifying, just wait until you hear number 6. Number 6. The human-eating monks of India. There exists a sect of monks in India who eat the dead. Yes, you heard that right. Meet the Yagori monks, one of the most feared and mysterious spiritual groups in the world. These monks believe that death is an illusion. To prove it, they do something so horrifying, it defies all logic. They meditate on corpses, drink from human skulls, and yes, consume the flesh of the dead. Tourists who visit their secret ritual sites often report seeing bones scattered around their camps. And the most unsettling part? Some believe the Yagori monks don't always wait for the bodies to decompose before eating them. But before we move forward, before we continue, please subscribe, because hitting your subscribe button can give me new motivation to work harder and succeed. Now, back to the countdown. Number 5. The Mayan human sacrifice, a blood ritual like no other. Deep in the heart of the Mayan civilization, towering pyramids stood as more than just architectural wonders. They were stages for some of the most gruesome human sacrifices the world has ever seen. Imagine standing at the top of a temple, looking down at a crowd of thousands chanting, their voices echoing through the jungle. In the center, a young prisoner, tied down, struggling to break free. Then, the Kai priest steps forward. His body is covered in sacred paint, his hands wrapped around a dagger, made of pure obsidian, razor sharp, capable of slicing through flesh like butter. And then, in one swift motion, the blade plunges into the prisoner's chest. Here's where it gets even more horrifying. With precise movements, the priest cuts open the ribcage, reaches inside, and pulls out the still beating heart. The crowd erupts in cheers as the priest holds the heart up toward the sky, offering it to the gods before placing it in a ceremonial fire. But wait, there's more. If the gods needed more blood, the Mayans wouldn't stop at just one sacrifice. Sometimes they beheaded entire lines of prisoners, rolling their heads down the temple steps like grotesque bowling balls. And if that isn't disturbing enough, just wait until you hear what the Aztecs did in number 4, because they took human sacrifice to a whole new level. Number 4. The Aztec flesh-cleansing ceremony, the most painful death imaginable. If you thought ripping out someone's heart was bad, what if I told you the Aztecs had an even worse ritual? Meet the ritual of Tlacaxipihualistli, a word that translates to the flaying of men. And trust me, it's just as horrific as it sounds. It began with captured warriors. But unlike the Mayans, the Aztecs didn't kill them right away. No, they made them fight for their lives. Imagine this. You're armed with a wooden club covered in sharp obsidian shards. But here's the catch. Your enemies have real weapons, and you don't. If you lost, your fate was sealed. Now here's where it gets truly unbearable. After the battle, the losing warriors were led to a stone altar. The priests would then flay their skin, peeling it off in strips while they were still alive. The pain? Indescribable. But here's the most disturbing part. The flayed skin wasn't discarded. The priests wore it. For bar days, they walked around Reyes wearing the skin of the sacrificed, believing it gave them the power of the gods. And yes, some bodies have been found, with clear knife marks on their bones, proving this horrifying ritual really happened. But if you think that's bad, the Waynex ritual is so disturbing, it was banned across an entire empire. Number 3. Infant sacrifice. the terrifying truth behind the Inca child mummies. Would you believe me if I told you that some of the best preserved mummies in the world are children? The Mali Inca civilization had a ritual called Capacocha, and it's one of the most heartbreaking rituals ever discovered. Unlike the Ayas, Aztecs, or Mayans, the Incas didn't sacrifice prisoners or enemies. They sacrificed their own beloved children. But here's the worst part. These kids didn't even know they were being sacrificed. The process began years in advance. The chosen children, often between 6 and 15 years old, were raised with the best food, the finest clothes, and treated like royalty. But when the time came, they were pulled up a mountain. And that's where the nightmare began. Once at the top, the children were given a ceremonial drink, a mixture of corn beer and hallucinogenic plants. Some were then left to freeze to death. Others? They were buried alive. Their bodies, perfectly preserved by the freezing temperatures, have been discovered. Centuries later, still wearing their sacrificial robes, their faces frozen in expressions of fear. And if you think this is the worst thing people have ever done to children, wait till you hear. 2, because it involves something even worse. 2, cannibalistic funerals, eating the dead in Papua New Guinea. Imagine a funeral where instead of burying the dead, you eat them. This was a real practice among the 4 people of Papua New Guinea. When a loved one died, they believed that burying them would waste their spiritual energy. So instead, they did the unthinkable. They cooked and ate the flesh of their dead relatives. But here's where things get horrific. Eating human flesh exposed them to a deadly disease called kuru. It's like mad cow disease, but for humans. And once someone got it, their body slowly shut down. First, they lost control of their muscles. Then they started laughing uncontrollably, a symptom so terrifying that kuru is now called the laughing death. And the worst part? They didn't even realize they were passing the disease to each other for years. But as shocking as this is, nothing, absolutely nothing, compares to the #1 most disturbing ritual of all time. 1, the most disturbing ritual ever, the corpse marriages of China. Yes, you read that right. In ancient China, there was a terrifying belief. If an unmarried man died, his ghost would haunt his family forever. The solution? Marry him to a dead bride. Here's how it worked. Families would buy a female corpse, dress it in wedding clothes, and perform a full wedding ceremony, binding the 2 souls together for eternity. And if no corpse was available, some families resorted to digging up bodies from graves, or even murdering young women to use as brides. Even more shocking, this ritual still happens in some parts of China today. Yes, there have been modern cases of people being arrested for stealing bodies, just to sell them for ghost weddings. We've just explored the darkest, most horrifying rituals in history, and somehow, humanity survived them all. Which ritual shocked you the most? Tell me in the comments. And don't forget, subscribe so you never miss another mind-blowing video. Your support gives me the motivation to keep making content like this. Thanks for watching. And remember, history hides secrets more terrifying than any horror movie. Who knows what other dark rituals are still undiscovered?